Alright, YouTube, Hillary's done with her Reno speech on the alt-right. Now, when she first came out, she pretended that she had intended to make a foreign policy-like speech. That, oh, yeah, I was going to come out here and talk about policy and all our great ideas, but there's something else we got to talk about. Then she launched into a tirade for 25 minutes about basically just a bunch of nonsense, which is predictable. That's what I expected she would do. She's sort of gotten to the point in the campaign where she's abandoned reason and is now simply using insults. It's gutter politics, sort of like what Trump was doing during the primaries. Meanwhile, he's taking care of his problem by being more presidential, cleaning up his act, not insulting people quite as much. I can't wait to see his response on Twitter. I'm sure it'll be pretty funny. This speech was more than 50% outright falsity. Most of what she said was absolutely not true. That's true about Bannon from Breitbart being a little bit of a shitfuck. That's definitely true. I'm, by the way, not even sure why Trump is taking him on into his campaign. It seems like a bad idea to me from a strategy standpoint. As far as the alt-right in total, though, being comprised solely of a bunch of skinheads, my goodness, are you indicating a belief that there are millions of Nazis in this country? I don't think so. I think what people are actually advocating is essentially two things. We're tired of being overrun in our own homeland by people who are not assimilating into our culture, and we're tired of the government making so many overtures to other states adopting foreign ideals instead of attempting to retain some sort of semblance of American culture. And that's really is also, as far as the resemblance of the Trump campaign goes, to the Brexit or to UKIP or Nigel Farage in general. She, of course, said, oh, well, Nigel Farage was up there on stage with him, and he hates minorities, and he hates women, and that's why there was a Brexit, and it's evil Nazis and nationalists and horrible bigoted people. That's not why the Brexit occurred, and that's not what UKIP has stood for. Nigel Farage came out quite some time ago and said, no, I'm not anti-immigrant, I'm tired of economic migrants from the other EU states primarily, and wanted to take more immigrants from other parts of the former British Commonwealth where people speak English, where people have potentially the seed of British culture in them already because they've mixed for, potentially decades or centuries. And I fail to see how that's a racial or a bigoted point of view. You're talking about places like Pakistan or India, as opposed to maybe a place like Poland or something like that, where people certainly, they're white Europeans, but they tend not to be part of that overarching colonial era culture that mixed so heavily with some of the territories and states that it was intermixed with in the first place. Then she said, oh, well, this is all like a Russian setup. Vladimir Putin is the foremost sponsor of the alt-right. What are you talking about? Vladimir Putin is not a nationalist. Vladimir Putin is a globalist oligarch who has no problem playing the globalist multicultural game. The biggest Muslim minority in Europe is in Russia. Not in Germany or Sweden. It's in Russia. It was a picture they had not that long ago where there were like 100,000 people in Moscow praying in the street on their prayer rugs and stuff. Now, I find it funny. Here's Hillary on numerous occasions during the speech ranting about the evils of Russia. But the Democratic Party only last election cycle was vilifying Mitt Romney for attempting to insinuate that Russia was potentially an adversary on the world stage. Obama himself came out and said, no, they're a competitor, but nothing more than that. The Cold War's over. And apparently say, oh, we're not really worried about Russia. But Russia is the scapegoat for every problem Hillary has been experiencing. WikiLeaks? Oh, Russian hackers. Snowden? Oh, gave stuff to the Russians. The rise of a political ideology that's not in line, lockstep with corporatism and globalism? Oh, it must be Russia. Russia is not responsible for all of these things. Russia doesn't even have nationalism. The concept, and I'll say, this is one thing in which the alt-right must familiarize itself. Putin is not an alt-righter, a nationalist, or anything like that. He's not some savior of the anti-globalist cause. He is a globalist. He has no problem with globalism. It makes him a lot of money. Russia gets around all these like little embargoes and constraints on trade anyway through its various criminal channels. And he ends up excising money from them too. He's not a globalist. He never he's not a nationalist. He never has been. Never will be. He's a former communist. He's not interested. He doesn't care which system is used as long as he keeps his billions of dollars and his expensive vodka and cigars and all the other stuff that he gets used to. That's what Putin's about. But to try to blame him for the rise of the alt-right and insinuate that it's literal stormtroopers roving through the streets, my goodness. And in the same token, here's Hillary Clinton. At the same time that she's talking about this horrifically dangerous Gorgon of Fourth Reich power rising up all over the world, she's also saying, oh, but yeah, it's a bunch of geeks. They're just all on the internet and stuff. How stupid can you get? The two comparisons don't make any sense in contrast with one another. Which is it? Are they a bunch of neckbeards wearing their cosplay Nazi uniforms, or are they actual stormtroopers that are going to take to the streets and start smashing Jewish shop windows? Which one is it, Hillary? I'd like to know. Are they dangerous, or are they something to ridicule and laugh at because they're not dangerous? Seems to be her problem. She rants about Infowars, about Alex Jones. I find it funny because I don't give a shit about Infowars and Alex Jones either myself. Alex Jones, when he says something, it tends to be a bunch of nonsense. Most of his predictions never come true. Most of his show is dedicated towards selling you iodine or protein supplements or water filters or whatever. I don't have a problem with it. I mean, it's infotainment, and the info side is a little bit anemic most of the time. But to say that there's something wrong with him, or that he's a Nazi, or a bigot, or that he has some problem with minorities and wants like a re-rise of Hitler-esque sort of politics in the world, my goodness, that's not what I'm seeing at all. He's just a goofy man. But in the funniest turn in the entire speech was her glowing praise for George W. Bush. She mentioned him multiple times. Oh, after 9/11, George W. went into a mosque and said Muslims can be peaceful too. Who cares what Bush thinks? This is just more evidence. I don't think she even realizes. This is just more evidence that the corporate Republicans that are so hated that they're barely clinging on to their positions right now are in bed with the corporate neoliberal Democrats. They're exactly the same thing. Yeah, I'm sure that she has a lot in common with George W. Bush. She's got the same mentality. She's a war hawk. She's a corporatist. She's interested in global slavery. She's a tyrant and an authoritarian. She's crazy. Yeah, she has a lot in common with George W. She mentioned Truman. Truman, such a great statesman. Oh, except for Hiroshima and Nagasaki, those hundreds of thousands of vaporized civilians. But it's okay because that was a time in the past or something. Truman. Then she talks about David Duke and again brings up the tired old line, oh, Trump didn't disavow him quick enough. He did, multiple times. I'm not sure what it means. And then she won't even talk about like Byrd there, whatever his name was, the other grand dragon of the Ku Klux Klan who endorses Hillary, works with her, and she gives glowing praise to him because he pretends to be, I regret the time I was in the Klan. Well, David Duke's not in the Klan now either, so does that mean that his neocon mentality is okay? Because he said, oh yeah, I'm not in the Klan anymore. I no longer want to hang black people, so, it's all good. Well, that's basically what Hillary's friend there did. He was the former head of the Ku Klux Klan too. Are people going to forget that? So I find this extremely, extremely funny. The entire speech, from top to bottom, was a bunch of bullshit. Every single word of it. Farage, totally wrong on what UKIP stands for. Totally, completely wrong. I watched Farage say these things myself. I watched his speeches long before the Brexit was even in people's minds. I was watching Farage speak. He never said a single thing that by our sort of standards would be considered even remotely bigoted. He's talking about wanting more immigrants, not less. He just doesn't want them from the EU states because it fucks with the economy, and it also fucks those other EU states. You think that Poland, by virtue of losing a lot of its skilled labor, that their economy is going to do well? No, it does. Globalism doesn't help the host nation, and it doesn't help the donor nation. I pointed this out. I don't want to see anybody's culture erased. And globalism destroys everything it touches. The same globalism that the liberals will praise when it brings immigrants into the Western world is destroying the nations donating those immigrants, because it's often taking all the very intelligent and very skilled individuals out of those economies. It destroys them. It robs, it gives them brain drain. This has been a big thing within archaeology for decades and decades. Anthropologists have spoken of this, about the brain drain of some of these cultures in the context of post-colonial mentality. Essentially, it's just as damaging as colonialism could ever be. You know, you get the one PhD in a nation, you know, you get like a dozen people with PhD equivalents in a nation like Ghana or Sierra Leone. They all go to the Western world, or they go to China or something to study and to work because they can make more money. Meanwhile, brain drain for the native culture. So foreigners come into the West, they get a lot of money for doing what they do, often start businesses and so forth. This happens to China. We do this to China with regards to their investments. A lot of rich Chinese businessmen who have gotten in on that more privatized segment of the mixed economy, they take their wealth and they buy things here in the United States because they know that the economy here is safeguarded by the largest military. They know that it's not going to get nationalized. They know that it's not going to get stolen from them. They know that it's not going to get taken for pennies on the dollar like the communist government over there might do if they hold land and businesses and so forth over there. The government might come in and anytime say, oh, you'll sell this to us. Well, I don't really want to sell. Oh, no, you'll sell it to us. Here's 50% of the value. So they buy things over here. It's a flow of money out of their country. This happens, and it hurts everybody. There is not a single person in this world who isn't, you know, hedge fund billionaire, Wall Street speculator, corporatist, you know, dishonest, corrupt head of some government. Those are the only people that benefit from corporatism, and then contractors. You know, sometimes that includes the odd small startup, but then they stop being a small startup once they get one of those no-bid contracts. All over the world this happens. It's no different from the way that a tin horn economy functions. And Clinton loves it. Those are the same people donating to her campaign. She puts out some fucking ad talking about the Klan and Trump. My goodness, you've got the former head of the Ku Klux Klan who was your longtime friend too. And you don't even say anything about it. By the way, if the Clinton Foundation's so charitable and did so much philanthropic work, why don't you ever mention it when you're on the campaign trail? You never want to talk about it for some reason. Talk about all of its great successes. Talk about all of its wonderful donations to the poor or to the polio victims or AIDS patients or whatever. Go ahead and talk about it and see if it holds up to scrutiny. This speech was piss. It was just nonsense from one side to the other. I managed to sit through it and was almost reluctant to keep it on because I had to listen to Hillary Clinton's steadily declining vocal capabilities. It was very funny for her to drum up her health. Yeah, okay. Yeah, you're pushing geriatric status. Admittedly, Trump is too. And you're pretending that you've got some magical elixir that gives you all that youthful vigor. No, you don't. It's just not the way that things work. You've had several falls, you've had several blood clots, you've looked up all sorts of anxiety medications and traumatic head injury stuff from the NFL. It doesn't look good. People aren't taken in by that crap. And this speech, as I said, what it's going to do is it's going to cause a lot of people who watch this speech to research what the alt-right is, and some of them, even if it's only a few people, will join the alt-right. It's not going to convince anybody in a supposedly fringe movement to leave the movement. It's not going to do that because they have no interest in what Clinton has to say. But those that are on the fence that have just heard her speech because they're still making up their minds over what they're going to support, they're going to Google it. And not every person, not every source that they find on the alt-right is going to be critical of the alt-right. They're going to find sources that are more apologetic towards it. And so I don't know what Hillary Clinton was thinking with making this speech. Even worse, to attack Nigel Farage. Why? You attack Nigel Farage and this person and that. Why? And it just makes her look like a mudslinger, honestly. It makes her look like she's stooped down to a level that she hypocritically derides Trump for having stalled out at for several months. And now she's at that same level. She's actually lowered the political discourse from her campaign substantially over time. At first, she was mostly dismissive of every attack that was flung her way, ignored them for the most part, and just talked about her policies. It turned out that didn't work so well, so now she's decided to go full gutter snipe. Unfortunately, I doubt that that's going to work, because one of the reasons that she did have the hardened support she had was because she was above such a fray. And those were people that saw Trump as a bully. People who don't get why the alt-right is particularly dangerous, especially when framed in the context of groups like Salon or Being Liberal that say, oh, yeah, but it's just a bunch of internet trolls drinking Mountain Dew, or Red Bulls or whatever. They're going to look at that and they're saying, oh, this seems like a little bit of fear-mongering. I'm not getting any significantly bad vibes from these people other than, yeah, maybe this person wears a swastika armband on the weekend and like plays Age of Empires and pretends to be Hitler or something. Well, it's not going to work out well for her. And you should have seen the enormous stream of shit posters on the feed. And this was probably like a secondary feed of this actual speech that was made. And there were thousands and thousands of people there, virtually none of which were receptive to what she was saying. The number of people who even tuned into this speech, there were probably only a few tens of thousands of people on the whole internet that were actually listening to what she was saying, other than to criticize it. Everybody else who was there, they were there to troll, which is exactly predictable. It's exactly what would have happened. But she should have known better. It's a total waste of her time. It makes no sense. Nothing in here made sense. The entire speech was so stupid. That's about all. Peace out.